Fantasy football has been played for years. It's one of the most exciting things about being an NFL fan. But like any long tradition, there have been many myths about it. Like some disappointing players, these myths have been turned out to be busts. In this video, we'll be debunking some of the biggest myths about fantasy football. Welcome to another classic on the Football Freak Show. It's easy to assume that fantasy football is reserved for the nerdiest and most meticulous of NFL fans. But there are plenty of average Joes that do great. There isn't a minimum requirement to play fantasy football, and it's socially acceptable for anyone to play. Well, you might think that experts have all the information and knowledge to win week in and week out. That's far from the truth. The beauty of fantasy football is its unpredictability. Star players can have an off game or an injury. Rookies and backup players can have amazing games, and there are so many moving parts that anything can happen any week. But there are a few basic rules and guidelines to follow. Just because you're a Chiefs fan doesn't mean Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce has to be on your team for that week. And just because you attended the University of Louisville or have a cousin there does not mean Lamar Jackson has to be on your team. Fantasy football isn't a question about fandom or which player you like more. If you happen to pick a player you like and they're bringing in points for you, then cheers to you. But being a big fan of a player should never be a criteria for picking them. Picking your favorite player and seeing them not bring in points is heartbreaking. So if your favorite player isn't the best option for a position, make the smart decision and leave them out of your squad. Fantasy football is one with your head, not your heart. As a matter of fact, if there's a player you detest but you have a gut feeling or stats points to him doing well, knock yourself out and add them to the team. Your favorite player would want you to get the most points you can on your team, even if it means leaving them out. But if you shouldn't pick players based on how much you like them, but how good they are in the league, where does that leave rookies who haven't had any playing time? Should you even bother having them on your team? Majority of rookies who get drafted serve as backup players to starters, so it's easy to dismiss them. How could you blame people who avoid drafting rookies on their fantasy team? The transition from college football to the NFL is not an easy one. But that's not reason enough to avoid putting rookies on your team. As a matter of fact, if you pick the right rookies, you'd be surprised at how well your team could do. Just like at the 2024 Rookie of the Year, the Washington Commanders QB Jaden Daniels. He racked up 358.82 points during the season. That's the second highest fantasy points by a rookie quarterback ever. Even C.J. Stroud, the 2023 Rookie of the Year, couldn't reach 300 points. Anyone who put Jaden Daniels on their team made a risky move. But they were rewarded for it, and he performed better than some veteran quarterbacks in the league, like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and Jalen Hurts. Contrary to popular belief, some rookies are worth the risk. Some number one draft picks are total busts. The 2024 number one draft pick, Caleb Williams, only got 305 points, making him the 16th best quarterback by points. Anyone who picked Christian McCaffrey last season isn't smiling either. But if rookies are too risky, at least picking players from Super Bowl teams is a safe bet, right? The truth about that might shock you. At first, this seems logical considering that teams have to play well enough to make it to the playoffs and to the Super Bowl eventually. But when you check what the stats say, they paint a bigger picture. One of the biggest busts during 2024 fantasy football was none other than back-to-back Super Bowl champ Patrick Mahomes with 343 fantasy points. There were 10 other quarterbacks someone could have picked and been better off. Eventual Super Bowl winner Jalen Hurts only played for 15 weeks and just slightly managed to find himself in the top 10. When you look at wide receivers, this point can't be made any more clear. Where does Super Bowl winning wide receiver A.J. Brown rank? 17th. Let that sink in. Devonta Smith, 27th. Super Bowls are nothing to go by when selecting players. You're better off ignoring how many Super Bowls a player has. Now, when you've done all the math and come up with the best possible team to start the season with, the battle isn't over yet. The chances that you want to keep your initial team selection throughout the course of the 17-game week are very rare. Your players might either get injured or underperform. So you'd want to either reshuffle your team or get rid of some players while bringing in others. And this is perfectly fine. There's no shame in it. The best mindset and strategy to have is a fluid one. Be ready to adapt as the league progresses. At the end of the day, you have the best chance of getting the most points by picking the players who get the most points on average. So as much as it's always a good idea to tweak your team, you shouldn't always buy into the hype of a player. Just because a player has a standout week doesn't mean you should immediately jump ship and recruit such a player. You need to look at future matchups of who a team plays and predict if they'll be able to replicate such performances. Bottom line, be sure to put some thoughts into changing your players between game weeks. And sometimes you're gonna have to sit out your best players. You probably think having the statistically best players in your starting roster ensures success, but this can change week to week, which is where your benched players come in as important. You can have the best players, but if the matchups don't favor them, they won't bring in as many points as you think. If your star wide receiver is up against the best pass defense in the league, I'm talking about a defense that has shut down every wide receiver they faced, they might not have the all-star game they did the week prior. You might be better off starting a different wide receiver whose team is playing a terrible defense that week for more fantasy points, especially if they're playing the worst defense in the league. There'll be weeks where your bench warmers perform better than your stars, so don't be afraid to take a chance on some backup players too. Another thing you should take a chance on is featuring defensive players and kickers on your team. Fantasy points are based on the performance of your players. That could be the worst team, losing week in and week out, but you will still get points for touchdowns, tackles, field goals, and interceptions. The point is, every single point counts. One place you can get a lot of these extra points is by featuring the right defensive players, teams, and kickers. So as much as you're paying attention to quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, make sure to give careful consideration to these other positions as well. And there you have it, some of the biggest and wildest myths about fantasy football debunked. Which myth are you surprised turned out to be untrue? Let us know in the comments section, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.